Welcome to the Next Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this episode, I have my special return guest back, Miss Ericka Young. Together, we're going to talk about anti-racism and so much more, and leave you with actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. We share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage, and you don't have to go at it alone. At Next Pivot Point, we believe we're stronger together. We are one. So Ericka does not need an introduction. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast this season, we've had Ericka back a few times because she's so insightful. And we get a lot of positive feedback on just the ability to have conversations across races, across different identities, both of us being passionate about diversity work and being advocates and wanting to bring more allies into the conversation. So Ericka, I'm so excited you made time to talk again today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on here with you and to share a little bit about what we're doing behind the scenes to make certain that we have a more diverse and inclusive place to be, our communities and workplaces and everywhere that we decide to show up. So thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since we last chatted. I think we had an episode about 40 days after George Floyd last time we connected.
Yeah.
And now it's been 4 months. And, I saw a post this week, a call to action for corporations that made the statement, maybe the donation, maybe even had, some sort of big rah-rah about Black Lives Matter. And the call to action was, well, it's been 4 months. What are you doing now?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's what we all have to ask ourselves, right?
Well, and I think that speaks to it's a journey. It's not a destination. So you might have been doing, some of the lip service up front, but the real activity, and this is where I think allyship really can sometimes get a bad rap, is performative allyship, where you're just saying the things when it's top of mind, when it's popular, but you're not present when it's not. You're not staying on the journey when it's not as cool to be talking about it. So I guess that leads me to my first question for you, Ericka. For people that have been on the journey for a while, yourself included, you and I compare notes from time to time. Like, what do you recommend to stay healthy on this journey? It's anti-racism, this work, it's tiring.
It is.
Compassion fatigue happens. Like, what do you recommend to folks now?
Well, one, I want to get back to what are we doing that we're like in terms of continuing the conversation. So I want to balance this. You have to stay healthy and continue the conversation, right? So I don't want it to be all about let's stay healthy and then we're avoiding opportunities. That can also, we don't want you to burn out because this is the long game. This is a marathon. This is something that we're doing for life, to be honest with you. In order to feel like you truly are making a difference, this is not a moment in time. And so I would challenge anyone who's wondering, what have I done lately? Yeah, let's figure that out. What have you done lately? And where can you show up newly? Right now, of course, it's all about the vote. That's a place to show up for sure. And it's also about continuing to educate our kids. It's also about continuing to deposit, read books, and make certain that you are staying engaged. But self-care is important. And so knowing when you need to go sit down and not be a part of social media is huge. I mean, I've seen so many things here recently that I said, oh, I'm not in a space to handle that right now. And it's okay in that moment to opt out. Maybe you taking a step back or taking a walk with a friend and discussing things versus getting involved in any type of social media responses is what's going to help you refuel. And so just knowing what's going to help you stay in the game is a big part of that. And that's different for everybody. For me, it's reading books. For me, it's discussing those with people. For me, it's assessing where my kids are because they're actively involved in trying to have their own lived experience as as they walk through this as a teenager and a young adult. And so, but self-care for me honestly is assessing what do I need today, and sometimes that's taking a step away from
Mhm.
the negative talk or you kind of have to stay abreast of what's going on in the news, but knowing how to protect yourself from listening to it, maybe reading an article versus watching all of it. And so you got to know yourself so that you can protect yourself for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. What are you doing to continue to maintain your energy?
Mhm.
And like you said, it's different. It's a choose your own adventure approach. I mean, for some
Mhm.
people, it could be taking that walk. For others, it's staying educated, taking a break from the news. If we were
Yeah.
comparing notes on the presidential debate this week, that's just one we're not going to talk about
There
because
you go.
that is
There you
not
go.
something we talked about. This it took so much energy out of us.
Mhm.
And knowing what's going to
Mhm.
take energy out of you versus give energy to you.
That's so important. And I feel like I get filled up in this work, but where and that is helping us all to become more aware and enlightened and our eyes are open. Where I get drained is when there's fighting and backbiting and name calling and finger pointing. That's where I get drained. And so that's why I mentioned the social media, and if I need to take myself off of that, or that's when I say, okay, today may not be the day to actually watch the news. I might need to just simply read an article, so that I can stay in the know without my emotions being so deeply affected. And so, you've got to know what's important, what works for you, because if you don't, then I mean, you can spend way too much time on the things that don't matter.
Mhm.
We've got to figure out what those things are for ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, we've been reading and comparing notes on books we read. That's one of my favorite things about our friendship is I always think like, what would Ericka think about this when I'm reading it?
Awesome.
I'm white and I'm taking a different
Hmm.
lens, right? So we have a favorite book, and so we're gonna
Yes.
support Miss Austen Channing Brown. Shout out, she is
Yes.
amazing. I
Love
just
it.
I just learned about her from Brene Brown's podcast earlier this year. Started following her work. She has a video series that's really powerful. Talks about all aspects of race, and I think in a really and I was talking to Eric about this as we were thinking about how to frame this. I hate to use the stereotype of she's so like relatable and easy to talk to and doesn't come off fulfilling the stereotype of the angry, black woman, which
Yeah.
is so unfair. But there's something real about her humanity that she
Mhm.
brings that I
Mhm.
found to be her lived experience is vastly different than mine. So I couldn't
Right.
relate, but I found her so relatable at the same time.
Yeah.
So her book, I'm Still Here, I read, and Erica always tells me books to read. So I finally got to be like, Erica, you should read this one. Of course, it was already on your reading list, so it's not like I really helped. But my whole thing I was thinking about the whole time I was reading it is what would Erica think? And I think for
Mhm.
white people, having a friend that you don't like put this burden on them to explain their lived experience,
Right.
but I was genuinely curious if this was just old news to you or if this was like, wow. And I love what you said about it. So tell our listeners, like, what did you think about the book?
I loved the book, I'm Still Here. I felt heard. I felt that Austen Channing Brown's words were mine that I didn't know I had. And it was so profoundly personal that I mean, the last few chapters, I had a hard time keeping my composure. um, and I shared a little bit of it with my daughter. Um, Mainly, the important section for me was her day in the life at work, from sunup to sundown, all of the microaggressions that she experienced from her perspective that potentially from the aggressor's perspective were innocent, and how that is completely taxing on her. And I shared that with my daughter. It was just a short section, and she stopped me and said, Mom, I've experienced this and I've experienced this. And she's 16. And so this isn't just reserved for the professional woman at work. This is for you know, woman who is of a minority who goes through her day and is dealing with people who aren't informed or people who aren't aware of what their actions and their words are doing. And so that was, I mean, I honestly felt like I've read so many books, and I probably read or listen to on Audible 2 or 3 a month. And that one is going down in the history books as a favorite right now because there's nothing like feeling heard. I mean, I sit there and I'll say to my husband, "Hey, I just need you to look me in my eyes and let me know you hear me. Like, put the phone down, no distractions." And maybe it's just for 10 minutes, but when you feel heard, like somebody can repeat your words to you, there's nothing like it. And I felt like she just was all in my brain. Um, so loved it. I think the book was fantastic and essential reading for lots of people. I sent it immediately to a handful of friends, and some of them have already finished it. So
Mm-mm.
thank you for the extra push over the edge to read that book.
I like you. I mean, there were three things that stuck out to me, and for listeners that haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's a short read too.
Yeah.
It was a 1 or 2 nighter for me. And that day, I call it a day in a life exercise, like all the
Hmm.
microaggressions that, like you said, from sun up to sundown, just from entering the parking garage at work to what people say to you, to being
Yeah.
misidentified as the other Black woman in the
Hmm.
organization, because there just aren't that many,
Hmm.
to being othered and just
Hmm.
being signaled that you're the only one like you
Yeah.
constantly in a day, how taxing and exhausting that is. And it's very different than a white woman's lived experience. So while we have
Hmm.
gender in common, the race piece I still can't fully understand because that's not my lived experience. But she gave me a big window into that world. I had my husband read it and be like,
Yeah.
does this happen to you? And he's like, yeah,
Right.
I don't believe, he almost didn't believe it. He was
Hmm.
a white man who was even more
Right.
removed. So it's very eye opening. And then her own personal stories. And she wrote a letter to her future son when she was pregnant about the experiences that he might have in the world. And for me, that's where I've really come full circle on allyship. I could relate to that on so many levels because even having white children, just knowing how much the world is built for them and how if we lived in a different country or we had different skin colors or we were born into a different system, how different the world could be for us and how
Right.
that's not fair. For
Hmm.
children, I mean, it's just not fair for kids. Black and brown kids should not have to experience these things. The future generation, this is not okay. It's not okay for us, but it's really not okay for them.
Yeah.
So where I'm at on my ally journey is okay, we're not going to see it in our lifetime. Right?
Hmm.
I'm going to die and this work will still need a lot of work. And Jane, my daughter on the way, like they will also not see it in their lifetime, but maybe their grandkids will.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to your point, we got to keep talking about this. We got to
Right.
keep our energy up about this and stay educated. I know what you're saying about reading. I read that book. That's the last anti-racism book I've read, and I read 10 this summer, which I'm not, I don't want a trophy or anything for that, but I
Hmm.
finally put it together on a bookshelf and thought, what are my favorite ones? And that definitely is my favorite one so
Yeah.
far. But I had to take a break after that because I'm feeling my energy wane a little bit. So I actually started reading a different book. Now
Hmm.
I haven't touched it in 2 weeks.
It's not as interesting, is it?
No. And then I got Hood Feminism sitting right next to me. I just got it from Amazon. I'm like, okay, you're going back in. You're ready. I put on the
Ah.
oxygen mask for a little bit. I took a break. I'm ready again. So just kind of back and forth, I think, as an ally. It's okay to step in
Mhm.
and out of the conversation, but you gotta stay in it for the long haul, like you said.
Yeah. Well, and I think mixing it up, I think that's where podcasts come into play, or articles, or watching a good, you know, documentary or something, just changing it up, getting a little different scenery, and maybe something for fun that maybe still kind of applies, but, you know, um, or I mean, part of allyship and this diversity work is about you stepping into somebody else's world. You know what I mean? Like, for, and this might not be you, of course, but I encourage parents who have white boys to go into a black barbershop and get their hair cut once or twice, you know what I mean? Or go to the field house where all of the kids are playing basketball and most of them are black kids and watching one of their games. And so maybe it's just shaking up what it is that you're doing and thinking about the learned experience is different from it, having to read something or what have you, and watching a movie you never thought you would watch, and thinking outside the box with some of that stuff too, because I think all of our learning doesn't come in one silo. We have to find different ways to engage our brain, and so maybe changing it up is part of that process too.
Yeah, I love that. Make it interesting.
Hmm.
And you always make it so interesting talking with
Yeah.
you
Or
about
read a
this.
kid's book. Read a kid's book. I mean, so simple. One of the favorite books that um matter of fact, I think I need to give this to my niece. A favorite kids book that I had for my kids is Shades of Black. And it was just showing all the different shades of
Mm,
black and likening them to things that the kids might know, like a sugar cookie. My daughter is the color of a sugar cookie. And just all the different things that their skin color could look like, and how fun it is to just play in that world for a hot minute,
oh, that's
even
cool.
not being a child or even not having a child. It's fine, do something different, see how we see ourselves, and we celebrate that. And
Mhm.
I think that's also a valuable way to kind of unplug but still stay engaged.
Yeah, I've been collecting children's books about diversity this year and have
Hmm.
invested quite a bit in revamping our bookshelf,
Yeah.
which it was in terrible shape to begin. This year, I
Mm.
looked at the books and they were mostly animals and white people, like
Hmm.
75% of children's books. So you have to consciously look for books about
Yeah.
diversity for kiddos. But Antiracist Baby, I actually have several copies of Ibram Kevin's book.
Wow.
So I'm getting gifted copies. I have a baby on the way. So
There you
everyone's
go.
sending it to me. Like I am going to make a really funny meme or collage with my baby and all these anti-racist baby books I'm getting.
That's awesome.
But it is. It's important that, and it's a way I think to think simplistically about it.
Hmm.
Jane, my daughter, naturally gets books from the library. She got Only One You, and it
Mm.
was animals. It didn't even have, it had fish, but a really good message about uniqueness and
Yeah.
being a good thing. So she's finding these books and bringing them to me now, which is kind of fun
Yeah.
to see. But you got to set some intention with your kids. And as
Hmm.
they get older, I know you've been intentional about the movies and young adult books and
Yeah.
getting that content in front of your kids as well.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Well, one last thing we wanted to talk about before we run, 'cause Ericka, I could talk to you forever, and we'll have you back again, I'm sure, before the year is up. So much work to be done in this space. For listeners, Eric and I are working on a series. So we have a certification series around unpacking racism. And that's going to start, our next cohort is going to start in January. It's virtual, it's 6 weeks. It's a great course on how to be an ally for others, especially through the racial lens. So we're going to co-facilitate that together. We'd love to have you. But in the meantime, Eric and I thought, with everything going on with the election, we thought, what if the week after the election, we had a
Hmm.
candid conversation about racism and what I need to do to be an anti racist? So we hope you'll join us there. It's an hour-long conversation. It's going to be super interactive. Eric and I, much like we go back and forth today, will do that and have some activities to practice using some of the tools around anti-racism. And some things we've been, getting our own training lately too. So we've participated in some anti-racism work of our own and been doing more reading and providing more tools. So we want to make it simpler for people. I know when I
Yep.
personally look for anti-racism training, I mean, you and I both have been comparing notes for years on this. I
Hmm.
can't get into classes. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's pull everything we can together and make this happen for other people. It should not be this difficult.
Right, right. Yeah. Let's make it easily accessible, easy to implement into your life, and relatable. And if we
Mhm.
can do that, we're making a difference. And that's what the game is all about.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be November 10th. I will drop the invite, that link in the show notes. So do join us if this conversation is valuable to you. Join us. You'll walk away with some tangible tools and tips. So we hope to see you there November 10th. Mark your calendar.
Yes, don't miss it.
Awesome, Ericka. Well, always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for helping me, and thank you for being with us. I know our listeners learn so much from you every time you're with us.
So good to be here. It's good to be a part of some of the solution. Let's see how we can make that happen more.
Yeah, we're all a part of that solution. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear this message? Hit the share button, connect with us on LinkedIn. You can search Ericka Young with a CK and Julie Gratz, Kratz. You can find us and share this episode anywhere you get podcasts. Every review helps other allies find us. I host this podcast because we are stronger together. We are one.